Well, I feel like this has the atmosphere of a seminar, and so you get to be a professor today, Senator Reid.
I've been a seminar in a long time, so this should be fun.
All right. I think it will be too. I know there are many faculty in the room, and I've promised Senator Reid that if he gets a question that he'd be curious to hear another answer to, he can call on any of you. So you should be ready too, and I hope you have questions as well. I wanted to return to Searchlight, Nevada for a moment. People talk about this little town a lot. They always say you come from Searchlight, but I think you still live there, do you not? Don't you have
No, I
a home
sold
there?
it. Finally, somebody was dumb enough to buy my house.
Really?
Sold it.
So you've abandoned Searchlight?
Not really. I still own a lot of property there.
Okay.
But my house was sold.
And they always say that this somehow this somehow explains something about you. So what would you say Searchlight explains about you? What did you take from that town and that upbringing that you think you still live out of today?
My wife, excuse me, for one of my birthday presents, took me to Searchlight and said, we're going to build a home here. So this was about 1990, something like that. So we've lived there since then. And it was a really nice home. I enjoyed it very much. Beautiful vistas of the desert. But to be honest with you, it was a place that I had memories of. I loved the desert, but I didn't look back at my growing up there with a lot of. I wouldn't want to do it again. Let's put it that way. So it was a town that had seen its better day. It was a town of 200-300 people when I grew up there. At one time, it was bigger than Las Vegas, but it was the only thing that was there when I grew up was they had prostitution. They had 13 brothels at one time. My mom, as has been indicated here briefly, she would do the wash-ups. People there, my dad worked when there was work to do. It was a place that I guess you could be raised in a better environment than I was raised in. So I loved going back to Searchlight because I loved the desert, but the memories of my childhood aren't like a lot of people's memories of childhood. Mine wasn't something I had a lot of fun.
So how did you break out of there? Because I'm sure you're not typical of the citizens of Searchlight.
I guess I was smart enough to realize I didn't want to stay there. I went to high school, everyone in high school. I went away to high school, and I would live with people during the week, and I would go home sometimes on weekends. But I was probably different than a lot of the kids that were there. You know, my mom ordered my clothes out of a catalog, Sears catalog, and I'm sure my hair was different, but everybody seemed to be nice to me. And I adjusted pretty well. And I've said this many times before in a book I wrote about me, that some of the people that was nicer than anyone else were Mormon kids. They were always nice to you. One of them was a big football star already, and anyway, they were nice to me. And the most important election I was ever involved in my life, I was elected treasurer of my junior class at basic high school. Now that doesn't sound like much to anybody, but for me, in my own mind, I felt that I'd been accepted by my peers. That was, I really listened to everybody. I was, my teachers, I tried to be a good student. And I was treated so well. I was sick. I got something, I don't know, I worked in between football and baseball season. I worked in a bakery, and I would get up go to work at 5 o'clock every morning, except on Saturdays I had to go at 4 o'clock, and I still maintained my social life as a high school student, so just didn't sleep enough. I could go to sleep standing up. And I got sick. They said it was rheumatic fever. I don't know what was wrong, but I was really sick. And while I was trying to get well to go back to school, 3 girls came to see me, and they said, what we want you to do, we want you to run for student body president. Wow, why would you want me to do that? Because everyone knew who the student body president would be. He was a brilliant young man. He was a much better athlete than I was. He had been freshman class president, sophomore class president, junior class president, and I assumed, I thought everybody else assumed he would be the student body president. Anyway, so these girls said, well, why don't you run? So I ran. I actually got out of my bed to go give my little speech to student body president, and I was elected. So being, excuse me, being student body president was really an important time of my life. I love that job. I love being in high school. I had met my little wife. I was a junior. She was a sophomore. And so it was an idyllic time in my life as a student. So that's why I didn't want to go back to Searchlight, okay?
And it seems you also saw the possibilities and gained the capacity to make that move out and up. But it's still a big jump to the United States Senate.
Well, I had a lot of help. And the people in that town of Henderson, Nevada, where I went to high school, a number of teachers took a special interest in me, and they helped arrange a little scholarship for me so I could go away to school, because they knew I would have a little trouble going to school. So I had a lot of help. People were really nice to me from the time I came to high school to the time I left. People encouraged me to do better.
And there followed then, after your education at Utah State, I believe, is that right?
Yeah, I went to Utah State. We graduated, and we married between my sophomore and junior years that summer, and we went to Utah State. My wife, Lynn, was 1 year behind me, much better student than I was. But as happened so often at that time, she gave up her education for me. We didn't have enough money for both of us to go to school, and we didn't have really enough for me to go to school. I had an academic scholarship, but my athletic days were long gone. My athletic career didn't work out. So Landra worked at Thiokol Chemical. She would go to Brigham City every morning on a bus and come home after dark, go to work in the dark, and then help me go to school. And I had time to study. I made really good grades in college, and so I remembered, as I said, I always tried to listen to my teachers, and I had it in high school. I had a teacher by the name of Mrs. Robinson. She was a government teacher, but also a part-time counselor. And she came to me one day and called me out of class, and she said, we looked at all your records, and I think you should go to law school. Well, I'd never met a lawyer. I'd never seen a courthouse. I knew nothing about anything with the law, but I accepted what she told me. So from that brief meeting I had with her, that was what I was going to do. I was going to be a lawyer, and that's what I did.
So what I'm taking from this is you listen to the women in your life, and that's how you've gotten where you are today. Is that right? I'm joking,
most of the
course, most of the time. One of the areas I'd like to explore with you, and I appreciate your sharing with us some of that background, and hope you'll continue to do that as we ask our questions, but standing outside the Senate, as all of us do, it can be quite a mysterious institution. And I wonder, given your long experience in it, now 30 years, if there's something you wish something that you know about the Senate that you wish the rest of us knew that might help us understand it better?
Well, the Senate is certainly one of the magical things of our government. The Founding Fathers had really, they were visionary. They had tried with the Articles of Confederation, it didn't work. And they were trying to come up with a constitution. And the breakthrough came when a New England delegate gave the idea for what is called the Great Compromise. And the Great Compromise was how we were going to have a state like New York, with all those people, and a state like Rhode Island, with very few people and small place, how they would want to work together. And the Great Compromise was just that. House of Representatives would be based on population. There would be 2-year terms. No one would ever be appointed. You'd always have to run for re-election. And the Senate, which would have 2 from every state. That was a great compromise. And it was the magic that allowed us to have a constitution. It was, as I said, visionary. And so what I would like everyone to know is the Senate as an institution, imperfect, but really has worked well over the years. It's going through some real struggles right now. The Senate existed for centuries based on collegiality, people getting along, not taking advantage of the rules of the Senate. The rules of the Senate have been built up over the years, but the reason they worked is because people were ladies and gentlemen and wouldn't take advantage of the rules. But in the last few years, as you've seen, that rules have been used to, in my opinion, not do good things for the country. I was talking to someone earlier today here. We have vacancies in the judiciary that are unbelievable. I talked to a lawyer he came to see me about the problems of the judiciary in Texas. We can't get judges approved in Texas. Texas has many judicial emergencies. Frankly, the Republicans aren't approving any judges, so there are no judges being approved. And we can't have, that can't go on. It just has been very bad for our country. Not only the basic funding of our country, but just things like having judges. We have vacancies all over the country with judges. Texas is only one example. So that's what people should understand, is that the Senate is an institution that has been very well documented, and people think they understand it, but unless we have some more teamwork between the two parties, it's not going to work very well, as it hasn't the last 5 or 6 years.
So I hear your stress on that word, the Great Compromise, and that what you would like us to understand is how much compromise is at the root of the institution and its capacity to operate.
Yeah. Legislation is the art of compromise. That's what it's all about. No one has ever introduced a piece of legislation and had it passed, any meaningful legislation, I should say, without it being changed. That's the system. It's hard to get a bill passed, and that's the way it should be. But take some people who, if you look back over the years, people who were uncompromising really weren't. Ronald Reagan is a good example. Ronald Reagan was he was the man that invented modern-day conservatism, but he was very pragmatic. We got a lot of things done I served with him, and he was a president who got a lot of things done because he understood that his rigid rules that he talked about had to be violated, and he would violate them himself to get things done. And we need more of people understanding that legislation is the art of compromise.
I have one more question, then I'm going to turn it over to you. It's related to what we were just speaking about. Can you help us understand the role of the two party leaders as minority or majority? Because you've served in both positions. What does it take to serve in that kind of role?
Well, I can only speak
What
from
are the
my
other senators
perspective.
looking for?
It's not a job that I ever anticipated I would get, but it's a job that I have, the leader of the Democrats. And I have approached this based on teamwork. I've been very fortunate with the times I've been elected leader. I don't know how many times it's been, 5 or 6 times every couple of years. And I've frankly never had a contested election. That isn't the way it's always been. I can remember when Tom Daschle, Senator Presser will remember this. He won by 1 vote. It was that close. He was Chris Dodd from Connecticut and Tom Daschle. He won by 1 vote. And that vote was cast by a proxy by Ben Nighthorse Campbell, who a short time later switched parties. So I've been fortunate. I've never had really a contest. And I think one reason I haven't is that I've tried to let everyone understand that I'm just one of the senators. I've had a totally different way of running the Senate than my predecessors, certainly different than Senator Byrd, Senator Daschle, Senator Mitchell. They kind of were a one-man team and they depended on their staff. But when I became the leader, I had a number of things that I started doing immediately. I had a meeting every night, every Monday night, where I had the whip, which has been Durbin all these years, Schumer and Patty Murray. And we've worked really hard together. And we go over what we're going to do this week. We do that Monday night. Tuesday morning, I have a meeting with another leadership group I've appointed of about a dozen people. And then by the time I go to my caucus on Tuesday, we pretty much gone through what we're going to do. That there's no controversy. Now, there are a few exceptions to that, but generally not. My caucuses over all these many years have been really quite smooth. And that is the way it's always been with some of the caucuses I've attended with others, and certainly as I've heard about the Republican caucuses. So I want people to feel invested in what I'm trying to do, and it's worked out pretty good so far. We have stuck together over the years I've been the leader. We've never not been together.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? The senator would welcome them. He really enjoys this.
Senator Reid, my name is Matthew Colson. I'm a law student here at UVA. I also have some roots in Nevada. My grandmother grew up in a ranch outside of Alamo, Nevada, small town just north of Las Vegas.
She lived where?
Alamo?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I spoke at the graduation a couple times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Barnegat Valley High School.
Barnegat Valley, yeah. They had a ranch out there. So I wanted to ask you, this is a lecture about religious liberty, and many Americans look to the Supreme Court to both define and protect their rights. And there's been tension in the past between legislation that has been passed to protect religious freedom and the role of the courts in terms of protecting those rights, particularly in how they're implemented on the state level. And I wanted to ask you, what types of risks do you see in the current climate to religious liberty?
What kind of what?
Risks do you see for religious liberty in this country, and what is the Senate's role in protecting our religious liberty now?
Well, first of all, your being a student at the University of Virginia must mean you're really smart. So puts me kind of ill at ease because I certainly couldn't be as smart as you. But
I would dispute that. But.
So without being too specific, we have an ongoing battle that's been going on during the time we've been a country. We've tried over the centuries to legislate religious freedom, but it's a lot harder to do than it appears to be. And a number of the issues that have been raised, we've never settled legislatively. They've been settled in the courts because they're the place of last resort. And we're in a very difficult area now. with all the changes that are taking place in our society. There are many different changes taking place in our society. There's efforts being made legislatively to protect what some people believe is religious liberty. But any time you try to have someone who legislates religious liberty, there are other people who feel they're doing just the opposite. And we're in that battle right now. I've had a number of meetings on issues in that regard now. I see Marcus Faust, who's a prominent lawyer in Washington, who's worked as a staff member in Capitol Hill for members of Congress. And we're trying to work our way through that. And it's not easy. And perhaps we will fail at that, and the courts will have to ultimately decide again.
Thank you.
It's a real pleasure to have you here today, Senator Reid. I have a similar question.
You don't go to law school
I
also?
do actually go to the law school.
It's too bad. I'm looking for a dumber question.
So during his visit to Washington earlier this week, Pope Francis made a surprise visit to the Little Sisters of the Poor, who, as you know, are currently challenging the contraceptive mandate under the Affordable Care Act based on the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. You voted for the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in 1993, but you seem to disagree with the way in which the court recently interpreted the act with regards to closely held corporations. So my question to you is, do you believe that the law applies to this group of religious sisters? And if so, what should be the outcome of this pending case?
Well, here's my take on some of this. I was the first senator to, I worked with a Republican senator by the name of Olympia Snowe, who's since retired. And the purpose of our legislation was to, if there was a insurance program that a federal employee had, they had to give them, if they wanted, a list of contraceptives that we provided in the legislation. Oh, that was, I can remember it was on a national talk radio program, and some woman called in and said, I can't imagine why you would do anything like that. I don't believe in contraception. I said, well, don't use them then. We weren't mandating using them, but if somebody wanted to, that should be part of a healthcare policy. And I feel the same way about some of these people, I think, going to extremes to try to, and they're backed, most of them are backed by, and I'm not saying the Sisters of the Poor are, because I don't know, but a number of these lawsuits have been filed have been backed by people who simply want to whack the Obamacare. They're not interested in what the issue is. They just want to do anything they can to hurt Obamacare. Obamacare was probably 50 years behind time. You can go back to the days of Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower, who talked about the need to have health care for everybody. An industrialized nation like us, without having a health care plan for everybody, is not very good to think about. So what we did was an imperfect plan. It's an insurance-based plan. Some people, you see all the polls. What do you think about Obamacare? Well, if you add in the people who say it's not nearly strong enough, Obamacare is really, a lot of people like it, far more than a majority. But they always add in, they always try to subtract from that the people who say it's not strong enough. So I think that all these battles as to who has to give contraceptives and all that, I think it's just it's like the woman that called in on the radio show. If you don't want contraceptives, don't use them.
Thank you.
Matt?
Good afternoon, Senator Reid, and thank you so much for joining us. Matt Hedstrom from the Religious Studies Department here.
So you're a professor?
Yes.
That even scares me more.
Yeah, no.
These are the dumb questions.
Yeah, exactly. The students will give you the tough ones. I thought you spoke very eloquently earlier about compromise and about the importance of compromise and kind of pragmatic approaches to legislation, to legislating. And I wonder how you think about how that relates to religious commitments, because it seems to me from one way of thinking about it could be that religious commitments would incline people towards more hard and fast positions, towards a certain kind of absolutism. So how do you work pragmatically as a compromiser while also having a firm sense of your own religious commitments?
As you look back at history, we had the Pope here. What a wonderful human being. A man who has given his life to what he believes is the truth, but yet, in the name of Catholicism and absolutism, we had the Crusades, the horrible things done in the name of religion. We have now, in the Middle East, ISIS, in the name of religion, doing the most atrocious things that a person could do to another human being. So I think religion is a religion of as the Pope, he came to the Congress of the United States with its partisan bent and did such a wonderful job. He did a good job talking about things that are hard to talk about. He's been called a socialist and all these kinds of things, and he said, I'm only talking about the gospel of Jesus Christ. He talked about the need to recognize climate change, that it's there, it's real, that we have to do something about the poor. We're ignoring the poor, and that's basically what Jesus' main message was, is the poor. He talked about immigration, that we're all immigrants, with rare exception. He, in a nice way, also talked about life, and everyone knew he was talking about abortion. There's a lot of us have compromised on that issue, perhaps. He also talked about marriage. That's been a lot of compromises taking place in marriage, in the religious minds, and you see that changing every day. So I think that there's a lot of compromise in religion, as there should be.
Senator Reid, my name is Chuck Matthews. I'm also in religious studies. It's quite an honor for you to be here with us. My question is in some ways very much a follow-up to your answer to Professor Hedstrom's question. We've just had this tremendously rich week, both with the Pope and then with your colleague John Boehner's resignation. And I wondered if you would just maybe reflect for a little while, both as a senator and as yourself, a representative of a once persecuted religious minority in the United States, just like the Pope. One of my students pointed out that 50 years ago, we were arguing about whether or not a Catholic could ever be president of the United States.
And a lot of us, we Democrats, and I'm sure the Republicans too, are hoping he doesn't run for anything because he'd beat us all.
Exactly. I think you're safe there. But I just wanted to hear you reflect for a little while, if you wish, on what this week suggests maybe about where we are as a country, both for good and ill, and where you think things might be going in the near future or farther down the line. Thank you.
My first exposure to Mormonism, I was a boy. I was living with an aunt in Henderson, Nevada. And I had a friend who was a member of the Mormon Church. He was handsome. He was popular. He was a nice guy. And he said to me one day, he said, why don't you come to this early morning meeting that I go to? He said, a lot of good-looking girls there. And I have to go anyway, so why don't you come with me? And it was seminary. And I had never been to a church, period, not Mormon church, but I'd never been to a church. And I went to that meeting, the first one, and the teacher was stunningly good. I didn't realize at the time, but he was also a Spanish teacher at the high school I went to. He was a local Mormon bishop. And the subject of the seminary that year was church history. Well, there are probably a lot of reasons, but that's why I have just so been interested in history my whole adult life. I think it was basically as a result of that class I took from Marlon Walker. Why do I mention that? Because he was so good at talking about the good and bad. He talked about the persecution of the Mormons, but he talked about all the success they'd had. And I became interested in history and church history at the time. And if you can look at any religion, but an American-based religion, which there's never been an American-based religion like Mormonism, it's had its issues over the years. And now it's at a time where everything is going pretty well for the Mormon church. Everything is going pretty well now for the Catholic Church in our country and basically around the world. But you know, their issues will arise, and we have issues now dealing with how some of the modern day issues are going to be dealt with. I've mentioned two of them. You know, we have the ongoing situation with abortion. We have the ongoing situation with the definition of marriage. And I think we're going to have to just wait and see how all that plays out. But it's not going to be without some bumps in the road.
Could I just ask a follow-up on that one? The United States Senate, of course, is not just concerned with domestic matters. It's very concerned with international matters. What do you see on the horizon internationally that you expect, or maybe already is, one of the great conflicts about religion, again, internationally?
The one thing you didn't mention, Professor, is we had John Boehner resigning. We had the Pope here. And I had a long meeting yesterday with the President of China. So he was here too, which is a issue that's facing our country. Well, an issue that has been swept under the rug now for the last 15 or 20 years. The Pope has hit on really hard, and that's climate change. What is happening around the world with the change in climates is going to affect everything. It's going to have the economy. It's going to affect people's religion, of course, because they're going to see things that they've never believed would happen, and more quickly than you would think. Of all the major cities in the world, most all of them are located on the coast. So if you look around the world, what city is going to be hurt more than any other city with climate change? Miami, Florida. Miami, the highest place in the state, is like 70 feet or something like that. And they're already feeling the problems they're having with the tides coming in so much more than they were. In Virginia, I've heard Tim Kaine and Mark Warner talk about the military bases here in the southern part of Virginia. They have large areas of the bases that can no longer be used because the water is coming in that didn't before. So I think that people's basic lives are going to change dramatically over the years. And if you ask the CIA, you ask the United States military, what's a major problem facing the world today, they say climate. Because it's going to, you see what's happening with the migrations of people because of the conflicts in the Middle East. But that's only a precursor to what's going to happen with places running out of water and being overrun with water.
So those migrations in particular will bring religion into contact and therefore possibly conflict, as well as all those other apocalyptic possibilities.
Look what's happening. You have in North Carolina, in today's papers, they have 27 Syrians that are refugees. People in North Carolina, people are raising hell because of that. How can we have these people in our state? That's only a baby step of what we're going to see in the future. The president said we're going to get 100,000, 150,000 Syrians here. If you got 27 that are creating problems with some people in North Carolina, just wait.
I'm Richard McDermott. I'm a retired professor from Weber State University in Utah. I'm an accounting professor, so I'm pretty harmless.
Let me just interrupt you and say the worst time I ever spent in my life in school was a year of accounting.
We work to make it such. Like you, I'm very interested in history, and I'd like just to focus back on the early days of the church. Joseph Smith and Brigham Young had an often adversarial relationship with the government in some ways. So I have two questions. One, what could have Joseph Smith and Brigham Young have done better to make the outcome perhaps more favorable or at least less antagonistic? And second of all, how has the culture, the courts, and the Congress changed today from back then? And if those same events had occurred, how would the outcomes perhaps have been different?
What members of the church, many don't realize is that Joseph Smith, among other things, was a politician. 1844, he ran for president on a really quite a progressive, radical platform. Free the slaves, create a national bank. And in 1844, that was really something. And he traveled around campaigning. It's easy to look back, you know. Hindsight is 20/20. What could Joseph Smith and Brigham Young have done to make things easier? With Joseph Smith, every day of his life was an adventure, because it was one day they were in bankruptcy, the next day somebody donated some dough to get them, so they had enough money to publish the Book of Mormon. I mean, it was just every day of his life was very difficult. This young man was dead before he was 40 years old. I don't know what more he could have done. I'm sure that he, being the imperfect person as he was, offended a lot of people that he shouldn't have. But you know, I don't know what more he could do. With Brigham Young, a lot of things he could have done. He had a much longer reign than Joseph Smith. He had more autocratic power than Joseph Smith ever had. And there are a number of things he could have just been nicer to everybody. From what I read about him, I think that he had so many good traits. You know, he's been historically said to be the best colonizer in the history of our country. There's not a second choice to him. He did that quite well. But it's easy for us to sit back and criticize people. You know, I see that with things that we do here in Washington and Congress. It's easy to have these. I read the papers today about John Boehner. There wasn't a kind word said about him in any of the editorials today, any of the op-eds, not a kind word. Now, I worked with John Boehner. As I spoke on the Senate floor, what's today, Saturday? It must have been Friday. Saying how much I liked him. He and I he's on one side of the political spectrum, I'm on another. But he never, ever misled me, never failed to tell me the truth. I didn't like to hear a lot of the stuff he told me, but that's what he told me. And I really learned to like John Boehner. He always told me how things were. He dealt, as he said, and well, this is a quote, dealt with a bunch of crazies, and he did. And I think he did a pretty good job doing with what he did. So I think it's too bad that people look back at his career as such a flop, because I think he could have done a lot of things differently than what he did. But he was there in the trenches trying to hang on to his job. He was Speaker of the House, and every speaker goes through that. And maybe he should have quit earlier or something. But I think that I think people are looking for human beings that don't exist for holding political office. You know, me, I've been in Nevada. I've never had a goal of making everybody happy. My goal was always try to make one more than 50 happy, 50% happy, and that's about how my elections have all turned out. But I've had such horrible things said about me and people tried to do to me. I just think that we're looked upon as trying to be. They want us to be perfect, and perfect people don't exist.
Isaac?
Hi, I'm Isaac. I'm a graduate student in the Department of Religious Studies here at the university. Thank you very much for coming, Senator. And I wanted to ask you, Just to go back a bit further with regards to the history question, in your view, when the founders wrote the Constitution, tried to set up the United States government, what did you think they saw the role of religion as, and how does that inform what you do as a legislator today?
I think that religion was spoken about more freely in those days than they are now. And people in their journals wrote a lot about religion and beliefs and faith then that they do now. But that doesn't mean they were more religious than people are today. It was just a different time, and socially it was a different time that people spoke more openly about some of these personal things. So I think that religion was an important part of what the Founding Fathers did, and I think religion's a part of what we do now. You pick John Boehner. Most people would not know what a religious man he was, but he was a very religious guy. As he said yesterday, I got up this morning, said my prayers like I always do, and I said, I'm finished, and I said, I'm going to quit today. That's about what it amounted to. And so I'm sure that part of the reason he did what he did, he felt some religious responsibility to be honest with himself, and he quit. So religion's part of what we do now today also. I would say this, every morning, I've been there opening the Senate for 18 years. I'm there every morning. And every morning we have a prayer. It's how the Senate starts. And the chaplain that we have now is a stunningly good person, African-American, retired chaplain from the Navy, retired admiral. He is a genius. He can quote scripture like you've never heard before. And I think we're fortunate. It's been helpful to me to start every day of my life in the Senate with prayer.
Please.
Hi, my name is Patricia Quadros, and I'm from Charlottesville. Lived here since I was 5 years old. Spent a year doing Hill internships.
You're doing what?
I did a year of internships on Capitol Hill.
Oh.
So my question, it seems like a lot of young people seem turned off by a career in public service and going into legislatures because they seem turned off by like the political machines, fundraising, trying to win votes or electoral votes. So what can we do to influence young people to, take that leap and get into public service? And do you think the Electoral College will ever go away?
I think the Electoral College is the least of our worries. I think that should be the major worry that we have is what Supreme Court did with the Citizens United case. We criticize Putin for being an oligarch. What does that mean? It means you have a person that's controlled by money interests. In Russia, people believe that 10 or 15 very wealthy people control everything that goes on in Russia. Well, if Citizens United is carried to what some of us are worried that it's going to be carried to, that's what we're going to have in America. Whoever will be the elected leader will be beholden to these huge super PACs. Every one of these people running for president today have these huge amounts of money at their disposal. And I'm sorry to say it's just not good for the country. And I really am terribly worried about the power of money in politics. And I think that there are people, and people realize this, there are programs going on where people are trying to get young people more interested in just simply voting. But there's some interesting thing there. I tried to make this as nonpartisan as I can, but let me just be honest with you. The Republican Party is doing so much that's awful to keep people from voting. I can't imagine limiting early voting, having voter IDs. There's no voter fraud that takes place in America today. We have 3 states that have same-day registration. Never a question about voter fraud. But these people, all they do is try to stop people from voting. Anything they can stop a minority or somebody that lives uneducated from voting, that's a good day in their lives. And that's terrible. No wonder people get turned off of politics. I mean, it's a struggle to vote. Under the rules we have today, my mom and dad couldn't have voted. They didn't have any way of getting that identification available. So I can understand why young people get turned off. I really can. The huge amount of money in politics and the efforts to stop people from voting.
I'm
so sorry about the partisanship, but I think it's awful what's going on.
Thank you. We're now really close to needing to close down, so let's stop the lines here. And
but you're only stopping because of her. I'm just getting warmed up.
I know. I was told I would have to do this. So let's finish this, Mike. You've been waiting quite a while, and then.
Sure, let at least these people waiting in line here ask some questions.
Well, these 2 have been waiting the longest, I believe.
What about these 3 over here?
And it's a longer line, but I've been watching. They came after these.
We like all of us, though, so by all means.
Yeah. I think we're being fair.
I have a question. So I lived in DC for a while. I love the power of DC and like just how everybody comes with a passion, and who cares how you're trying to fix it, but you have a passion and you want to fix the world. And I found it interesting as time has gone by. Some of my friends that I'm talking about the LDS community now, that are from different political parties, are struggling in church because they feel that they don't have a place, because they feel that their congregation tends to be of one political party, and they feel that they don't belong. And my question to you is, for you, I don't know, you personally, if you have this problem, or if everyone's just like, stand back, it's Reid. But how would you address someone who is struggling, wanting to keep coming, but feeling that maybe I don't have a place anymore?
Well, I think that they are wrong. I have different political views than a lot of people that I go to church with, but not everybody. And I feel very comfortable. Every word I've gone to, people have been, when I was no one knew me, and now that people know me, everyone has been very understanding. I think it's really quite remarkable that people feel that way, because the church has done a good job of trying to. I can remember when I was running once a few years ago, and I was so happy that church came out with, they had one of the general authorities came and gave a press interview saying, everyone should understand the church does not take position on whether it should be a Democrat or Republican. We like Democrats, we like Republicans. That was good. It came right at an important time in the election process. It didn't affect me favorably, and I think it affected a lot of people favorably. So I think that if you look back at one of my favorite Democrats as general authority was James Faust. And you had to admire this man. He held elective office. He had been a party big shot, in the state of Utah. He was the campaign chair for Frank Moss, who was a Democrat. And he was a bishop and a stake president. Bumper stickers he had in his car. When he came on church property, he took them off. And when he left, he would put them back on. So
how do you do that?
So my point is this. If you look for examples of the leadership of the church, there are a lot of Democrats and people have been quite progressive over the years, but a lot of very conservative folks. Of course, a lot of the conservatism went back to the Ezra Taft Vincent for his advocacy for right-wing causes. But when he became the leader of the church, there was never a word that he said about all these radical things he'd been involved in before. So I just think that the church is a place where I just think it's a place to get away from politics and speak your mind. All the time I've been involved, I've never hesitated doing that. That's one reason I felt good about the church. I don't want to make this too long of an answer, but I remember when I was a brand new member of the church. I had been to law school and came back, and one of the first meetings that I went to, for you non-Mormons, went to a meeting they called a priesthood meeting, and I was stunned because I'd been going to school back here in Washington and church back here in Washington. I was now in Las Vegas, and somebody said the most disparaging things about African American. I thought, well, that's terrible. So I wrote a letter to the general authorities of the church, and I got an answer from one of the members of the First Presidency. And it's a letter, 5 kids and moving a lot. I lost it somehow. Anyway, the letter's gone. But what the letter said is that he had been present when President McKay was praying about this issue dealing with race, and he'd been there to listen to him pray for long periods of time, and that in a number of countries in Africa, there was a church members who followed all the teachings of the Mormon church, but of course, because of the problems that we had with who we could proselyte and who could be leaders of the church, and he would hope it would come pretty soon. And I waited a while, but it came about. So I just think that everybody should just kind of not look for excuses. There are lots of excuses. I've had them over the years. I could have gotten upset at people, but I believe the tenets of the church. I have tried my best to live them, and I'm not going to let somebody that's trying to mess with me in church mess up how I feel about things. So I don't worry about them.
I really appreciate that.
They don't like me. I don't care.
Well, Senator Reid, what a treat to have you here. So thanks to you and to Kathleen. I'm Jared Harris, a professor at the university here, but I promise not.
What do you teach?
I teach ethics at the business school. Just think about that for a moment. That's a tougher crowd than you've got here.
I could teach you a few things about ethics.
Yes. Well, I'd like to ask a personal question if you're willing to take it. We share a couple of things in common. I'm also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we have a Nevada connection as well. Like a lot of young men, I served a mission, and my mission was in Nevada. I never served in Searchlight, but served in Tonopah and Winnemucca and lots of little places like
great.
that. So I wanted to ask you something personal. I appreciated you sharing your story about your first exposure to the church in that early morning seminary class. I guess we share another connection. I currently serve as an early morning seminary teacher. I hope that I'm as effective as the teacher that you identified. But I'd love for you to sort of, if you're willing to comment, to carry what you started to talk about earlier forward a bit. And I'm just interested in you reflecting a bit on how your faith has informed your service, your public service, and all of these opportunities that you've had as you sit down with the President of China and all of these important things that you're a part of. Maybe you'd comment a bit on how your faith in the gospel is an active part of how you approach your professional responsibilities. Maybe that was too difficult a question.
No, one thing's real personal. You have to be careful that you don't become too kind of preachy. But I believe, and I'm entitled to believe what I want to believe. I believe that I have the ability to call upon a higher being to help me in situations of difficulty. And I've done that my whole life, especially in the last many years. What I've had this job is, my career, I've done my best to avoid the press. I'm not one that goes out seeking the press, but I can't, under my job I've had the last many years, do that. So I come out and there's cameras, as you can't imagine, all the cameras and stuff. And so there, most any occasion I go out and do that, I just ask for a little help. I'm not going to make a fool of myself. I have the ability to respond reasonably to the questions that are asked. So that's how I I've tried to conduct my personal life. So there are many experiences I have, more than once during the day, a lot of times where I call upon help that I think is available to me. Just say, I need a little help, okay? That's what I do.
Thank you.
Emily, I need you to be quick here.
Yeah, you talked about the civility that existed in the Senate being an important part of how things were getting done in years past. And I wondered if you could reflect on what you think we can do as a culture and society to help foster that in the upcoming generations, especially when we kind of face a world that is divisive politically and religiously, and where differences seem to be spotlighted more than commonalities.
First of all, for those of you from Virginia, the two senators from Virginia are really wonderful human beings. Warren and Kane are really good. I think the world of both of them. The biggest problem we have in politics today is money. I really do believe that. Number two is a short memory of how things used to work. Trent Lott was the majority and minority leader in the Senate. He was a Republican from Mississippi, extremely conservative. But he was so pragmatic that he believed that his job was to try to get things done. And during those times that I was the whip, I handled all the floor stuff for Daschle. And so Trent Lott and I, we got so much done. So people need to go back and look at, you can be a conservative and still work for a better country. And I don't know, that's kind of been lost. I think part of it is all this, somebody asked a question about whether it's any compromise in religion. People have to realize there has to be compromise in politics. These people aren't willing to compromise in politics, and that's why we have these dead ends. That's why government closes, and we have these situations that really shouldn't happen. And so I think everyone, first of all, has to understand you should not be turned off by government, even though I understand why people are. You have to be turned on to government and have to become even more concerned about who represents you and how some of these radical people who are controlling, because some people just say, I've had enough of this, and so you leave it to all these crazies to, can you imagine that? With polls among Republicans, 40% of them think that Obama's a Muslim. I mean, something's got to change. This is so foolish. We got to get back to where we used to kind of. What did Rodney King say when he was in L.A. when he was involved in the riots? Can't we just get along? And I think that's where we need to go.
Randy, I'll give you the last question.
Okay, Randy Gwynn. I graduated from law school in 1984, but I'm not going to ask a legal question. It's going to be a policy question.
I could probably answer the legal question.
So, in the late 1830s, the Mormons believed that they were being persecuted in Missouri based on their religious beliefs and practices. And Joseph Smith and a delegation of other leaders went to Martin Van Buren, the president, and asked for the federal government to step in and help them. And they came away empty-handed because President Van Buren believed that either he didn't have the power or he shouldn't exercise it to help them. Today, the most sort of public and obvious example of religious persecution is going on in the Middle East, where ISIS is targeting Christians and other non-Muslim groups, and based on their religious beliefs and practices, beheading men, raping women, and enslaving their children. Is there a role for the U.S. government to try to help those people or help protect religious liberty? And if so, should we exercise it?
We as a nation have done a lot to try to stop this carnage. And with the one group who were trapped on the mountain, and we were involved with Great Britain and France, and we did the airlift and got a lot of them out of there. Of course, what the ISIS did is they took a lot of the women, about 1,500 of them, and you've read about it, was they got absolution that was okay to rape the women first if you prayed first. Yeah, you could rape the women if you prayed first. There's not much more we could do on a short-term basis than this. But I am convinced that the war against terror is being won. It's not like the Battle of the Bulge. Pretty soon when that's over, the war's over. It's going to go on for quite a long time. But you're having people of goodwill of all religions, all political persuasions are recognizing that what is going on in the Middle East is just simply wrong. And I think that war is not the answer to the situation. I think that we should do everything we can diplomatically. I think what has been done, for example, people have a misconception of what the Iran deal was. The Iran deal wasn't to make sure that Iran was a good neighbor for the rest of their existence. The Iran deal was only to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon. That's all it was. And that's a tremendous step forward to solving some of the problems in that whole part of the world. And many of the other issues dealing with Hezbollah and all the other, that will work out, I think, in the long run. But on the short run, I think doing things like was done there, where you had Russia and China agreeing that what we were doing there to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon was part of the deal. They had the right to veto that in the United Nations. China and Russia didn't do it. They were part of the deal. So I think that I think the glass is half full rather than half empty. I do believe that progress is being made against these terrorists, these people who are giving religion of any name really a bad name. And I hope that people will be patient and let us try to work through all these issues that deals with so much hatred and brutality.
Thank you.